Would you like an analysis of what a wider China-Russia-Iran coalition could look like if this escalated into a global conflict? You said yes. ChatGPT said, here's a detailed scenario analysis of what a wider China-Russia-Iran coalition might look like if the current Iran-US conflict escalates into a broader geopolitical or even global confrontation. Axis of revisionism. Scenario: China-Russia-Iran. Coalition in global conflict. Strategic goals of the coalition country. Strategic goal: Iran. Expel U.S. influence from the Middle East. Secure regime survival. Assert regional dominance. Russia. Distract and weaken the U.S. and NATO. Expand influence in MENA, Middle East and North Africa. Keep the West off balance. China. Dismantle U.S. global military and economic hegemony without open war. Ensure energy security. Unify Taiwan under favorable conditions. Coalition behavior in escalated conflict. 1. Iran. Frontline belligerent expands use of proxy militias. Hezbollah, Houthis, PMF in Iraq, etc. Launches missile strikes at U.S. bases in the region, Israel, and possibly Gulf states. Shuts down or disrupts the Strait of Hormuz, approximately 20% of global oil flows. Engages in cyber attacks on U.S., Israeli, and Gulf state infrastructure. 2. Russia. Hybrid war facilitator. Provides real-time satellite intel, EW, electronic warfare, and cyber ops. Supplies Iran and proxies with anti-air systems, e.g. S-400, and tactical missiles. Opens secondary pressure fronts, e.g. Baltic airspace violations, Arctic escalation, Balkan unrest. Uses Wagner-type paramilitaries in Iraq, Syria, and North Africa to stretch U.S. forces thin. 3. China. Global enabler and strategic opportunist. Offers logistics, financing, and diplomatic cover at the UN. Launches cyber attacks on U.S. infrastructure, finance, energy, telecom. Escalates tensions in the South China Sea or Taiwan to divide U.S. forces. Disrupts global supply chains by halting exports of rare earths or critical components. Theater-wide conflict zones. Region conflict form. Who's involved? Persian Gulf, naval warfare, drone missile strikes U.S., Iran, possibly Israel, Iraq, Syria, proxy and militia warfare, Iran-backed militias versus U.S., Lebanon, Israel, Hezbollah, Israel warfront Iran, Hezbollah, Israeli IDF Eastern Europe, NATO-Russia standoff escalates U.S., NATO versus Russia, South China Sea, naval blockade, airspace contestation, China versus U.S., regional allies, cyber battlefield, infrastructure sabotage, all parties. What the coalition would not do, at least initially. China and Russia would avoid putting uniformed troops on the ground in Iran or attacking U.S. homeland assets directly. They would prefer asymmetric pressure, use of non-state actors, private military companies, cyber attacks, and economic weapons. Strategic risks of the coalition. Risk description: NATO activation. Any Russian strike on U.S. or NATO assets could trigger Article 5. Economic blowback. Global markets could collapse. China especially risks losing key exports. Israel nuclear option. If overwhelmed, Israel may resort to nuclear strikes on Tehran or Damascus. Taiwan. Flashpoint. China could seize the distraction to move on Taiwan, triggering U.S. war. Summary: what this looks like. The Iran-U.S. war becomes a containment conflict, where China and Russia fuel the fire through hybrid warfare. The U.S. finds itself in multi-front crisis management: Middle East, Ukraine, NATO, Taiwan, Indo-Pacific. If mismanaged, this could spiral into a global conflict, especially if any party miscalculates, e.g., strikes a U.S. carrier or launches nukes. Here's a week-by-week escalation timeline for a hypothetical global conflict involving the Iran-Russia-China coalition versus the U.S. and its allies, beginning from the moment of the initial U.S. strike on Iran's nuclear facilities. Week 1 to 2. Initial shock and retaliation. U.S. bombs Iranian nuclear sites. Iran launches missiles at Israel and U.S. bases in Iraq and Syria. Hezbollah and militias activate. Rockets fired into northern Israel. Oil prices spike. Shipping in the Strait of Hormuz disrupted. Russia and China issue strong diplomatic condemnation and place militaries on heightened alert. Week 3 to 4. Regional escalation. Iran attacks U.S. ships in the Persian Gulf using drones and fast boats. U.S. responds with airstrikes on Iranian naval and missile sites. Russia begins providing real-time satellite intelligence to Iran. Chinese cyber units conduct deniable intrusions on U.S. infrastructure. Israel invades southern Lebanon to suppress Hezbollah. Week 5 to 6. Global expansion. Russia opens new fronts in Eastern Europe. Massive drills near Ukraine. Cyber attacks on Poland and Baltic states. China militarizes the Taiwan Strait, announcing a blockade exercise. Iran-backed Houthis attack UAE and Saudi oil infrastructure. U.S. forces are stretched thin across CENTCOM, EUCOM, and INDOPACOM. Week 7 to 8, coalition coalesces. Iran, Russia, and China announce a defensive coordination pact, calling it an anti-imperialist alliance. Russia moves warships to the Mediterranean. China sends a destroyer group toward the Indian Ocean. U.S. Congress declares a state of emergency, authorizes expanded military operations. NATO raises readiness to DEFCON 2 to 3 equivalent. Week 9 to 10, strategic tipping point. A U.S. aircraft carrier is damaged by Iranian cruise missiles. In retaliation, the U.S. destroys major Iranian military infrastructure, possibly including key energy facilities. China begins live-fire drills around Taiwan, intercepts U.S. and Japanese reconnaissance flights. Russia uses tactical proxies to create unrest in the Balkans and North Africa. Weeks 11 to 12, global conflagration or de-escalation. Two possible forks. A. Escalation. China blockades Taiwan. U.S. responds with air and naval deployments. Russia moves into eastern Ukraine or deploys tactical nukes for demonstration. Limited nuclear exchange risk becomes real. Global recession begins. UN fails to broker ceasefire. B. De-escalation. Heavy global pressure leads to back-channel talks in Turkey or Switzerland. China pulls back from Taiwan in exchange for U.S. halting new strikes in Iran. Ceasefire in Israel-Lebanon. World enters a new Cold War phase with militarized blocs and fractured global trade. Final notes. Civilian casualties and refugee flows would be in the millions if conflict expands across Lebanon, Iraq, and Syria. Cyber attacks on global financial systems and energy infrastructure would be used as strategic levers throughout. This war would not follow classic World War dynamics, but would be multi-domain: land, sea, air, space, and cyberspace. Here's a fictional day-by-day news timeline simulation, written as if it were unfolding in real time through major global media headlines and reports. This dramatized timeline begins just after the U.S. strikes Iran's nuclear facilities and tracks escalation, panic, alliances, and diplomacy. Global Flashpoint simulation, 12 days that changed the world. Day 1, June 22, 2025. Headline: Trump, we destroyed Iran's nuclear core. Strike was spectacular success, U.S. B-2 bombers strike Fordow and Natanz with bunker busters. Iran's IRGC issues chilling warning: our enemies will taste our fire. Oil jumps to $112 per barrel. Gold and crypto markets surge. Day 2, June 23. Headline: missiles rain down on Israel as Iran responds. Over 100 Iranian missiles hit Israeli airbases. Iron Dome intercepts 85%. Hezbollah fires rockets into Galilee. U.S. bases in Iraq, Al-Assad, Erbil, targeted by ballistic and drone strikes. Day 3, June 24. Headline: USS gravely hit by Iranian drone. Swarm in Gulf, casualties reported. First confirmed U.S. naval damage: 9 sailors killed, 17 injured. CENTCOM declares offensive maritime posture. Biden and Trump hold separate emergency security briefings. Day 4, June 25. Headline: Russia sharing intel with Iran. NATO alarm bells ring. Russia's defense ministry denies involvement, but satellite movement spotted. China warns U.S. to avoid further destabilizing the East. Lloyd's of London halts shipping insurance for Persian Gulf traffic. Day 5, June 26. Headline: Israel launches ground incursion into southern Lebanon. IDF crosses into Lebanon to confront Hezbollah missile batteries. Tehran calls it a Zionist-American full-scale war. Iranian cyber attack knocks out Kuwait's oil terminal systems for 12 hours. Day 6, June 27. Headline: China moves carrier group near Taiwan. Taipei raises alert. USS Ronald Reagan redeployed from Japan to South China Sea. Chinese drills announced in response to U.S. aggression in Middle East. Taiwan warns of pre-invasion posturing. Day 7, June 28. Headline: UN in chaos as Russia vetoes ceasefire proposal, markets freefall. Global stocks lose $4 trillion in value. Iranian proxies attempt to overrun U.S. consulate in Basra. S&P 500 hits lowest point since March 2020. Day 8, June 29th headline. Russia conducts emergency exercise in Kaliningrad with nuclear-capable systems. NATO raises readiness level to Alpha Alert. Poland calls up reserves. CIA confirms cyber intrusions in Texas power grids tied to China-linked group. Day 9, June 30th headline. Trump vows crushing blow. After new wave of Iranian attacks on Gulf fleet, USS Theodore Roosevelt damaged near Strait of Hormuz. U.S. responds with airstrikes on IRGC missile sites, killing 58. Tehran says, this is just the beginning. Day 10, July 1st. Headline, China announces full military blockade of Taiwan. Dozens of PLA Navy ships encircle the island. Japan places SDF on war footing. Biden warns, any move on Taiwan is a line Beijing must not cross. Day 11, July 2nd headline, Iran's IR-6 centrifuges destroyed. Israel blamed for sabotage bombing. Unconfirmed reports of Mossad-backed operatives behind explosions in Isfahan. Iran threatens to hit Haifa with long-range missiles. Cyber blackout hits parts of Dubai, Tel Aviv, and Athens. Day 12, July 3rd. Headline, G7 emergency summit ends in fracture. World sliding into multipolar war. France urges diplomacy. US and UK demand Iranian surrender. Russia floats Iran-China-Russia Joint Defense Pact proposal. World enters uncharted territory. If you like this content, please subscribe, hit the like button, and comment below this video, and we will be back with more content soon. Thanks for watching. And remember, don't believe the BS, disinformation, and horse manure Trump and Musk are trying to shove down your throat. Have everything fact-checked. Down with Big Brother.